What do all these pictures have in common? It wasn't a trick question. I'm in all these pictures. My name's Ola Labib, and I'm a British Sudanese pharmacist who's turned comedian. But I always ask myself, in what order am I those four things? I was born and raised in the UK within a family of hard-working immigrant parents that taught me my language and my culture. I actually spoke my mother tongue before I spoke English because my parents knew that I was going to end up learning the language anyways, so they wanted to preserve my language and my heritage. And then I started school, and I was the only person of color in my class. But when I was in school, I never felt like I belonged. It's not because I looked any different from everybody else, but I never understood why most of the kids wouldn't accept me. Overall, we were all the same. We all really enjoyed putting things up our noses. But then came my first parent-teacher meeting, and I remember my teacher telling my parents, Ola needs to integrate more with the other children. I was 6 years old. How was I supposed to integrate with children that I knew their parents weren't happy with them playing with me because I was black? How does that make any sense? I personally think I've got more of a caramel macchiato complexion. You see, I grew up within the Sudanese community. All 8 of us, 5 of which were my brother and my parents. And we grew up in the 90s in a very small seaside town. And we used to do everything together. We would eat together, we would celebrate together, we would even find reasons to celebrate. Who knew buying a new coffee table or finding meat for half the price was a reason to party? But they were my support system, and it was the only place I felt like I belonged. So, when we went home from our parents-teacher meeting, my dad told me the best way to build bridges between ourselves and the local people of our community is to be a vital part of their community. And not only that, he said the most important thing is to have a respectable career that would give back to their community. My dad gave himself as an example. He's a teacher. So he represented Muslim people and Sudanese people as great British citizens. So I decided to become a pharmacist. Well, I didn't decide to become a pharmacist. My parents gave me 3 options. Either I was a doctor, a pharmacist, or engineer. And I worked as a pharmacist for the National Health Service for 10 years, and I specialized in cardiology. And I always went above and beyond in my role because my dad always told me, as someone from immigrant background, you have to work 10 times as hard to progress in your career. But I felt like I got mixed responses when I worked for the National Health Service. There were people that really appreciated my care, but there were others that would rather have been treated by somebody else. I had a patient who was started on a new medication, and when I started to talk to her about how to take it, she told me, "Oh, I don't understand the Indian accent. I want to speak to someone who speaks proper English." I know what you're all thinking. Didn't you say you were Sudanese? Yeah, I am. And for the rest of you, no, double dosing her didn't cross my mind. Here she was. Or the visually impaired lady who had no idea what I looked like. And she told me, "I'm so glad that I've got a proper English person caring for me. I'm sick of all these foreigners taking over our jobs." Because I'm British, I very politely agreed with her. But then I gave away my cover because I sneezed and I said, "Alhamdulillah." I came to realize that I was just being tolerated. Patients didn't come to hospitals to build bridges with ethnic minorities. To some patients, I was just another bitter pill they had to swallow with the rest of their medication. I went to work in a hospital, to build bridges. But it just turned out that I felt that it was a never-ending construction, like the roads back home. And by back home, I mean the UK. Some of the potholes are so deep in the UK, you could probably swim in them. But then came the dreaded day that I made the biggest error of my career. I made an error so serious that I jeopardized a patient's life, and it was one of the worst days of my life. How could this happen? Well, it was a combination of things, to being overworked, to being understaffed, to being worked so much that I had no personal time. So when I went home, I was emotionally, physically, mentally exhausted to only go to work the next day. And it was at this point in my life that I thought, I need a career change. I need to find a job that will give me an equal balance between my work life and my home life. But it was during this crisis, I literally had no idea what to do. So my brother sat me down and he went, listen, forget about careers. What do you enjoy? And I said, well, that's easy. I enjoy comedy and I enjoy the beauty industry. So he said, why don't you do stand-up comedy? Because we both know you and beauty just don't go together. Thank you, brothers. And that is when I started my comedy career. Oh, it wasn't. And that's when I started my comedy career. I went from performing in an open mic in a really dingy, dirty comedy club to 2 people that were so drunk that they couldn't tell me apart from the mic stand, to 4 years later being the first Sudanese woman ever to perform at the O2 Arena in front of 15,000 people. Thank you, thank you. But that wasn't my biggest challenge. My biggest challenge wasn't the nerves, it wasn't the pressure for representation, it wasn't the limited opportunities for people of color. My biggest challenge was telling my dad. I was terrified. I could literally imagine what he's going to say. I walked 20 miles in the desert, barefoot, for my education, to leave my family and friends so that my daughter can leave pharmacy to become a clown? Just in case you want some evidence, here's a picture of my dad walking in the desert to go to school. But I understood why he thought like that. I genuinely understood it. Growing up in Sudan, the only people that would make it out are people of academic backgrounds. So I had to make the hard decision. I decided to keep my comedy career a secret. And for 3 years, I led a double life. I was a pharmacist by day and a comedian by night. But my cover was blown, unfortunately. My performance at the O2 Arena went viral on Sudanese social media. News spreads across Sudanese aunties faster than a fart in a hot shower. Except the hot shower is not as toxic. And just as I expected, my dad went mad. How can his daughter stop saving lives in order to do comedy? But I argued with him. I was like, Baba, at the end of the day, comedy and pharmacy are not that much different. At the end of the day, you know what they say? Laughter is the best medicine. And what did my dad say? Tell me a joke. And I did, and he laughed, but then he stopped. Laughter is not the best medicine. I've still got diabetes. And apparently my comedy career also gave him high blood pressure. But I did have to ask myself the question, how will comedy build bridges between myself and other communities? So first we have to look at the breakdown of a bridge. So first you have the foundation. This takes the entire load of the bridge. So for me, my foundation is my mental health, making sure I make good choices for myself. You are your own foundations to the heavy loads that life brings you. Wow. I just went from comedian to philosopher in like 15 seconds. Then you've got the substructure. This is the underlying support of the bridge. So this would be my family, my friends, my community. And then you've got the superstructure, the over top part of the bridge. So the bridge that takes on all the live load and builds bridges between communities to the other. But this is just a superficial level. Does that mean in order to build that bridge at a superficial level, we have to assimilate or integrate? Do we have to assimilate? So does that mean if I go to France, I can only eat baguettes? I did eat a lot of baguettes when I went to France, in all honesty. Or if we go to Italy, does that mean we can only eat pasta? Oh, I did eat a lot of pasta when I went to Italy. Or does that mean because you're Sudanese, you have to be a doctor, pharmacist, or engineer? I think I'm giving really bad examples, aren't I? Or do we have to integrate? So does that mean we have to incorporate ourselves into society, meet halfway? So because I'm Muslim, if I go to a Western country, does that mean I have to go to pubs and bars even though I don't drink? Or if I go to Canada, does that mean I have to be polite to people even though I'm a bit socially awkward? Or does that mean because I'm British, when my parents get old and dependent and start to nag, and even though it goes against everything I believe in, does that mean I have to put them in an elderly care home? Well, that's definitely an incentive to integrate. Or are these just superficial stereotypes of what it means to belong to a certain community? So I asked the question, what does it really mean to be part of a community when you're a person of the diaspora? And that got me thinking, what does all communities come together for and have in common? I found a quote by a man called Jose Andres Puerta, and I Googled it like a week ago because it fit perfectly with this presentation, that said, I realized very early the power of food to evoke memory, to bring people together, to transport you to other places, and I wanted to be part of that. Last Ramadan, I gave 5 people food poisoning, so food is my method of burning bridges. But 2 years ago, I was sat with my dad as he was watching a comedian on social media, and he was laughing so much at a joke he said. And the joke went a little like this. I got married last year, and people kept asking me, oh, what did you get when you got married? And I told them, oh, I got a cow. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, when I got married, I was given a cow, but my husband told me to stop referring to his mother as that. What I noticed about that joke particularly, that everyone in the audience came from all different backgrounds. It was amazing. And that was a joke I told 3 years ago, and it got 15 million views internationally on social media. And my dad turned to me and he said, you know what, Ola? We finally found the link between all communities. And I thought, finally, he can accept my comedy career. So I said, laughter, right? And he said, no, we all hate our mother-in-laws. But I found through comedy, we can talk about our experiences and we can actually learn that we have a lot more in common than we think. Through comedy and through humor, we can actually ease tensions and have really difficult conversations and bring each other together, which is better for our mental health. And it gives us the choice of who we listen to and what we choose to bring home. But wait a minute, mental health, choices, that's not the superstructure of the bridge, that's the foundation of the bridge. So actually, if we bypass all these layers of the bridge, should we not be united at the foundation? So I found that comedy was the link between me and other communities. So I updated the quote. I realized very late the power of comedy to evoke memory, to bring people together, to transport you to other places, and I wanted to be part of that. You see, growing up with my experiences, I never thought I was going to integrate. I never thought I was going to build bridges. I thought the only way to do that was to change who I am. But I felt that the only people that were changing, even if it was one person at a time, were the people watching comedy, which changed their view on me and my community. So I want to ask you this question before I go. How do we start building bridges from the foundation? Do we actually have to adopt each other's choices, lifestyles, cultures, religion? Or do we just have to find that one link that brings us all together? Why are we focusing on our differences rather than our similarities? And how can we start building foundations all over the world? I truly believe if someone as little as me in this huge wide world can make a difference, then you can all too. Thank you.